Staying at Nassau Correctional Facility over Thanksgiving weekend was an eye-opener for me. There were two main meals there, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. They weren't very filling, and I quickly realized that I'd screwed up big time by giving my two rolls to Squatch, since I was hungry long before nightfall. Also, by the time our food was brought to us, it was barely warm, regardless of what was served. Soup, pasta, sandwiches, etc. Also, it didn't seem like there was much to do here. There wasn't a gym here that had gangbusters working out. Surprisingly, most of the guys were reading, playing cards, checkers, or chess. The biggest thing that awaited me was boredom and my own thoughts. Since being taken away from home, I hadn't heard from my family. I had the opportunity to call, but no one answered at home. I also tried calling my parents, but it was a collect call and no one answered there. I was going to call Tim or Jerry, but I decided I didn't want any of my friends to know what had happened to me, so I didn't. And that was a big deal. Besides feeling like a failure, I was also terribly ashamed. I'm in prison. I'll never be able to say I wasn't in prison if I'm asked about it in the future. True, I'm not a criminal, but it was cold comfort when I realized that I would spend most of the week behind bars. Every night, one of the guys would have what was called a sit-in, where some of the inmates stocked up on food for the day or traded to get better food. Some of them had loans from the cooperative, which allowed them to buy coffee, tea, and almost everything else. After the last meal, we would gather up everything we had collected and then use hot water and hand heaters to make instant soups, bread. Anything that could be heated and eaten would be collected in a garbage bag and left to go sour until we had something warm and hearty in the evening. I volunteered to participate Saturday and Sunday and enjoyed a bowl of instant soup and crackers both nights. I learned that I was not the only drunk in this company, a term I immediately became uncomfortable hearing. The inmates seemed to know what your misdemeanor was, and no matter what it was, you were assigned to a group. There were different degrees, for example. Theft was major and minor, with the former being more prestigious than the minor. Drinking and hooliganism was a little lower in rank, but assault and battery raised my status. All in all, it was all very childish, but it was my world and universe for 4.5 very busy days. Finally, Monday came, and I and about 20 others from my section and others were escorted to a waiting blue and white jail bus where we were handcuffed to the seats and taken to Nassau Court in Westbury that rainy morning. We were let in and allowed to wash, no shaving, and generally clean up while we waited in a side room hidden from view. And we waited. The trial went from 9 to 11:30, and then from 1 to 3:30. There were many people in court besides us. We could see them through the curtains, hundreds of people scurrying back and forth. Some of them stopped at our window and pressed their faces against the narrow slit to peer inside. What the hell is this? Is it a cafeteria? Were they looking for the restroom? Some of them were damn fat, ungroomed or unshaven, which, given the state of me and my fellow inmates, made no sense. I would have welcomed the opportunity to put on something better and clean up. But these knuckleheads live in the real world, and they just don't have anything to be proud of their appearance. One by one, our names were called, and the court official led the guys out the back door to the room where they were supposed to be. I watched them go through one by one, waiting for my chance to go through as well. Skelly, James Skelly. The bell rang at 11:04 on the clock. I raised my hand, and the officer unhooked me from the bench and led me down a short hallway to a greenish-colored room. There was a round table and 4 chairs, a couple of plant photos on the counter, and another door on the opposite wall leading outside. Here sat a thin man in his 30s with poor posture, a small belly, and thinning hair. His body radiated signs that screamed, "I don't care about the job I'm doing right now." He stood up, extended his hand for me to shake, and introduced himself. "Mr. Skelly, I'm Nathan Sweeney, your court-appointed attorney." I shook his hand and was surprised that he held it firmly, even though my palm was a little sweaty. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Sweeney. I wish this had happened under different circumstances." We both sat down, the court official remaining standing by the door. "I've familiarized myself with your case and was wondering if you have any hesitation in pleading guilty." "I don't know." "What exactly are you guilty of?" "Assault, drunk, and disorderly conduct. We do not recognize the charge of resisting arrest because you did not approach the officers. We also don't recognize the charge of endangering minors because your sons weren't around during the altercation." "Whoa, whoa," I held up my hand. "Where did that come from?" "After your incarceration, Mrs. Skelly filed a protective order against you in her own name and in the names of John and Joel Skelly. He ran a hand through his hair and then went back to leafing through the papers in front of him. I suppose we could sue in this case even if they were on the premises, but it depends on what the judge looks at. I was still fixated on what he'd said earlier. Wait, what? Why would Myra do that? What? I can't see my kids? She has to protect them from me? I'm their father, damn it. I love them, and I love her. Why should anyone have to protect themselves from me? Nathan shrugged. I'm sure you love your family, Mr. Skelly, and that they love you. But Mrs. Skelly has to go to these lengths, even to your detriment, to protect her children. Our children, I corrected him, pointing to my own chest. Mine and hers. Ours. Those are our children. Again, I hear that protect crap. Protect them from what? From me? Mr. Skelly, the courts work a certain way and they work slowly. No one wants to tear you away from your family a minute longer than necessary. Everyone wants what's best for all parties, but when it comes to children, they're often cautious, and that means we'll have to take certain steps before the matter is resolved. So what do we do next? How do we get this sorted out quickly so I can go home? We go and plead guilty to assault, drunk, and disorderly conduct. You have no criminal record and no priors. You'll enroll in an alcohol program, show significant improvement, satisfy the court, and then the order will be lifted and you can come home. And how long will that take? I inquired. 15 days in jail, minus the time already served. What? He continued. Then 3 months of therapy and addiction treatment and another 3 months of supervised visits before the order is reviewed or lifted. I stared at him, eyes wide with shock. Are you freaking kidding me? Nathan drummed his fingers on the table, looking at me with as neutral an expression as possible. No, Mr. Skelly, I'm not mocking you. It's just the way we are. He folded his papers into a folder and slipped it into his briefcase. And that's assuming everything works to our satisfaction and you follow the programs without deviation. Otherwise, things could drag on. What? What if I don't plead guilty? What then? He shook his head. I would strongly advise against it. Your wife suffered injuries that are documented. Your children witnessed the attack. Your actions were documented by 8 different people. You were clearly intoxicated, but be thankful you weren't driving at the time, as the punishment would have been more severe. Fixing his collar, he continued. Also, if you plead not guilty, you will have to testify post-bail and receive a much longer prison sentence and monetary fines. My professional opinion is to do as I have described. Or, if you are not satisfied with my advice, you can hire your own attorney if you wish. My head was spinning. I didn't want to piss off this guy Sweeney, since he seemed to know what he was doing, and I seemed to be in a complete mess. Okay, Jimmy, you can go over there, eat some crow, and get into whatever shit they want to get you into. All right, Mr. Sweeney, we'll do it your way. I just want to get home and get back to my life. Fine. He nodded to the officer, who nodded his head and disappeared down the hallway. We chatted some more until the officer came back and indicated for us to follow him. We stopped at a thick wooden door with a thin window, and the court officer opened it and led us inside. The courtroom was quite small, smaller than I expected. At one of the tables, I saw my wife wearing a white button-up blouse, which I called her church shirt, because she wore it every time we had to go to a wedding, mass, or funeral. I looked but didn't see my boys, and I felt terribly sad. Behind her sat my mother-in-law Stephanie and my dad. Since my mom was nowhere to be seen, I assumed she was sitting with Jay. I wanted to shout Myra's name but kept silent, shuffling around in my prison clothes and feeling like shit. I was escorted to another table where my lawyer and I sat at the other end of the room. I stared at Myra, who was looking at me with watery eyes and trembling lips. Her cheeks were blotchy, and it was obvious to me that she was barely on her feet. Stephanie kept her expression impassive, and only the diamond gleam in her eyes let me know she was mad at me. Awesome. As for Dad, his skin was ruddy and flushed, and his jaw was clenched so tightly I thought he was going to knock his tooth out. He was breathing so hard that his nose quivered and clenched with every breath, and his chest heaved like bellows. It had been years since I had seen my father lose himself in an Irish rage, and I had to admit I was glad I was in court, rather than confronting him and his seething temper. The case of Myra Skelly v. James Skelly and the State of New York v. James Skelly is hereby declared open, announced one of the court officials standing next to the judge. I didn't know who was who, but the judge was pretty obvious. He was in his mid-50s, graying hair, thick-rimmed glasses, the judge's robe they wear, and he was sitting behind the bench. But the look on his face, the way everyone in the room looked at him, everything here confirmed that this is a judge and you are in his sphere. I listened to the lawyer on Myra's side speak for a bit, and then Sweeney gave his speech, trying to refute everything the other guy was saying and soften it up. I had to admit, being 5 days sober and fresh out of jail, I sounded like a real piece of work. The judge had a few comments and questions, but I was only half listening while the lawyers did their dance. My attention was completely focused on Myra. I love this woman. I know all her moods, her thoughts, her wants and needs. And in that moment, I knew two things unmistakably. One, she was terribly upset and depressed, and two, she was also terribly angry and ashamed of me. I could see how she occasionally cast a sharp look at me, similar to the one her mother had. The way her strong, narrow lips pressed together to an almost bloodless whiteness when she caught herself looking in my direction for too long. The way she wiggled her right leg gently but continuously, slowly rising and falling, rising on her toes and falling again. I don't know of another time when Myra was so damn furious, and I couldn't talk to her, which only made it worse. Nathan poked me in the ribs, and my attention returned to the judge and his narrow-eyed stare in my direction. "I said, Mr. Skelly," the judge repeated, "do you agree to join the anger management group as well as the alcohol addiction group?" "Yes, sir. Yes, Your Honor. Whatever it takes." He kept his gaze on me, but then pulled away slightly and lowered his gaze to his desk. "You must successfully complete both programs before we can discuss changing the order to allow you supervised visitation with the children. You can use this as an incentive to cooperate with the counselors and complete the program as soon as possible." "Yes, Your Honor. I will." He nodded his head. "You will be returned to the Nassau Correctional Facility for 15 days, after which you will be released. Be advised that you are not to come within 100 yards of Mrs. Skelly or the children. You must also stay away from the marital home. Once you are released, you can make arrangements with the sheriff's department to have them come to the house and take any personal items you may need." He tapped the gavel and said, "Dismissed." Nathan stood beside me as one of the court staff escorted me back to the waiting room. My father's voice said, "I'll pick you up when you get out. You're going to stay with me and Mom." I nodded my head and looked at Myra to tell her, "I'm sorry." But she closed her eyes and shook her head sadly. She didn't even look at me as I was being led out of the courtroom. As Nathan said, I was only supposed to spend 10 days in Nassau Correctional Institution, but I thought it was too long. My mom put $25 for me in my commissary account, which may not seem like much, but it was like a little piece of heaven. The first thing I bought was a 20-ounce bottle of root beer, and it was like liquid bliss. The next day, I bought a small bag of Lay's potato chips. Another day, I bought a cup of coffee. Little things, but when you don't have access to them and are denied the opportunity to try them, they are that much sweeter when you finally get them. On my 13th day in prison, as I was enjoying an hour of yard time, which meant we could walk outside, I was approached by 4 Latino-looking guys walking toward me, palms out. "Hi, are you Jimmy Skelly?" Quiz time. What do I answer, yes or no? Obviously, they know who I am since they singled me out and walked right up to me, so the question was rhetorical. They wanted to see what I would answer. Yes, and I was outspoken no. And I was a wuss and a punk. And I wasn't a goddamn punk. I slowly stood up to my full height and stared at my interlocutor with my most indifferent gaze. Yes. That was it. Nothing more to it. Let them sort it out for themselves. "Thought you should know Les is mad at you." I shrugged. Who the hell was Les? They looked at each other. "Doesn't it bother you?" "It doesn't bother me. I don't know anyone named Les." "Les, man. Jorge Morales. You almost broke his neck." That was the guy I got in a fight with. "And?" I didn't want to assume anything. "Just saying, man. Les ain't right in the head. He's like Napoleon, always picking fights with the big guys. He's a cell warrior at best. Listen, thanks for the warning, but I'm leaving here in 2 days and I'm not coming back here. As long as he gives me my freedom, I'll do the same." The speaker in the foursome shrugged. "No problem, buddy. Carlos wanted to let you know that Les is foaming at the mouth about coming after you. If he does come after you, it won't be because the Iron people have any grievances. Les sells wolf tickets when he mentions the people. Okay?" I had no idea what exactly was being said, but it sounded like Les Morales, whoever he was pissed at me and his gang wasn't, because he often hung out with the big guys. Like me. Pretty damn nice. What's next? An invitation to the creep's Christmas party? I needed to get out of here, away from this school playground. Done? Got it. Thanks and tell. Carlos, thanks too. De nada, he replied, and the four of them walked away. And then it was time. Day 15. I took a long shower with crappy soap and shampoo that smelled a little like oil, trying to clean myself up. When I got out, I was given my old clothes, unworn, and belongings, and then escorted to the front doors, where they let me through the main doors and both parts of the barbed wire fence until I was in the parking lot. And there was the Pope. He was standing next to his crappy Honda Civic, arms crossed over his chest with his big ass sticking out from underneath. There was a lot more gray in his red hair than I'd noticed before, and it was weird. But I never realized how deep some of the wrinkles were on his face. He weighed 60 pounds more than I did, and he was in his late 50s. But I didn't want to find myself the recipient of his punches or slaps. My memory flashed back to the many times he'd used harsh parenting techniques while I was growing up. You look like shit, Jimmy. Great goddamn greeting, Dad. Tell me something I didn't know. Sorry, Dad. The stylist isn't coming until Thursday. Don't get snippy with me, smartass. He opened the driver's side door and climbed in, showing me to sit on the other side. I already have to pick up my son from jail. I don't need to listen to any more of your damn talk. He waited until I sat down before starting the car. Buckle up before I'm tempted to throw you to the side of Newbridge Road. We drove home in silence. My father abruptly jerked out of his seat and accelerated sharply. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, and his eyes were fixed on the road. Look, Pops, I said. I'm sorry. He snorted. I really am. I really am. Your wife had black and blue fingerprints on her goddamn wrists for a week, asshole. He slapped the dashboard. What kind of shit are you? Dad, it was an accident. Bullshit, kid. I think it's bullshit. He grinned as he spoke. Too much salt is an accident. Hitting another car while parallel parking is an accident. No, Jimmy. What you did was damn deliberate. You deliberately drank too much, and you deliberately hurt your goddamn wife. I didn't mean to do that. The hell with you, Jimmy. The hell with you and your whiny shit. I didn't mean to do it, my grandfather, you bloodthirsty asshole. I kept my mouth shut the rest of the way until we arrived at my childhood home. The first thing I noticed was my baby outside. Inside, he was piled up with a bunch of boxes and bags. I assume it was clothes and stuff. Dad grumpily got out of the car and I followed him. He opened the door and called out, Mary, I'm back to see your son, the delinquent. Mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on the pockets of her robe. I smelled corned beef cooking and assumed Mom was cooking it for me. Hi, Mom, I greeted her, shoving my hands in my pockets, not knowing what kind of greeting I would receive. She only held back for a second before stepping towards me and giving me a big hug. Oh, Jimmy. Welcome home, son. Are you okay? You didn't get hurt out there? Jesus, Mary, exclaimed my father. That boy more than anyone he meets was fine. I'm all right, Mother. It's all right with me. Thank you for letting me stay here. Don't think about it. We just want you to get better, that's all. She led me into the kitchen. Come on, I'm making dinner, and you look like you haven't eaten properly. The first day home, I didn't tell my mom about being in jail, didn't make my dad angry by being around him, showered with real soap, and wore my own clothes that fit me. The next day, December 11th, I woke up early in the morning and drove my car to the Florence building to talk to Doug about what had happened and hopefully get some kind of check. When I walked in the door at 6:50, the conversations behind the counter stopped, and all my coworkers just stared at me. Someone whispered, Holy shit, Jimmy, where have you been? And that was enough to summon Doug from his office with the sound of a chair scraping against the wall. Jimmy? Skelly? He stepped out of the doorway and stopped, staring at me. You, he said in shock. What the hell? Go to my office. Now. I followed him in, and he slammed the door behind me. Where the hell have you been? I told you that if you screw up one more time, you're out of here. Didn't I tell you that? Didn't I tell you that? What the hell? You thought I was out there? Making this shit up? Doug, I'm sorry. I was in jail. Well, la 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 la. Thanks for the news on Channel 7. I found out you were in jail when I finally got through to your wife Tuesday morning. Doug, you have to let me explain. He held up his hand. No, Jimmy. No, Jimmy. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out two envelopes. Here you go. Your last check, vacation and sick pay you didn't use. Take it and go. He waved his hand toward the door. I'm not going to fight your unemployment, so sit on your ass for now and figure out what you're going to do. Because whatever it is, you don't work here anymore. I took the checks and slipped them into my pocket, standing up. Thanks, Doug. I really screwed up. He took a deep breath and looked up at me. The anger that had filled his tirade suddenly evaporated, and he leaned back in his chair, looking much older than usual. Yes, that's right, Jimmy, and that's too bad. Because I always thought you had potential. He shook his head. Listen, kid. Fix whatever's broken in your life and get your head in order. Get busy with something of your own, okay? I mean it. I shook his hand and nodded. I'll do my best, Doug. Thanks for everything. I drove away, keeping my eyes straight and my shoulders squared, not letting anyone realize how damn exhausted I was inside. I stopped by the bank and deposited two checks, surprised that the second one had over $1,000 in it. Jimmy must have been sitting idle for days, I thought. After that, I headed home, to my parents' house. Being at my parents' house was unrealistic. I had no contact with my wife and kids, but my parents talked to them every day. They always relayed my messages, and I could hear my boys yelling, "We love you, Daddy," when Mom picked up the phone for me. But I was lonely. I had so much free time. No job, no family, nothing. Just my thoughts and how much I missed my wife. On Monday, I went to the Phoenix house in Hauppauge, at the back end of North State Highway. The court had recommended that I get alcohol treatment, so to show that I was taking it seriously, I went there and met with Sally Ristatin at 11:30. She was like Phoenix House, a little old, a little shabby, and wearing a lot of makeup. Mr. Skelly, she purred, really purred, shaking my hand with both of hers. Welcome. Welcome. May I call you James? We're a little informal around here. I suppressed a smirk and replied, Sure, James or Jimmy is fine. Great, great. Let me tell you a little bit about what we do here. I mean, we, meaning you and me, because we don't do the hard work of solving your problems for you. No, no. We show you how to deal with your addiction on your own and come to a point where you can live with it, not live for it. I looked around. The office didn't impress me. Should I move in here? No, no. We have inpatient and outpatient programs, of course, depending on the severity of your situation. From what I've read in your file, you don't need inpatient care. She licked her lips and continued. James, you do realize that this kind of therapy only works if you want it to, right? Of course, I know that. I need it, and I need it now. I need to get home to my family. Why? I frowned. Why? What kind of damn question is that? Why? It's my wife, my kids. I love them, and I want to come home. Do you want to come home the way you were or not? Look, Sally, I don't understand these questions, but I want to come home and learn to control my problems so I don't drink so much. So in that sense, I don't want to be the way I was. She tapped her finger on the desktop. James, you may not want to believe this, but you can't just reduce the amount you drink. You're going to have to learn to admit that you have a problem, face it, examine your urges and triggers, and realize that once you become an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic for life. There is no reduction. There's only prevention and vigilance. I raised one eyebrow. I think that's a load of crap, Sally. I've already quit once. Didn't work, did it? I snorted derisively. Apparently it didn't. I'm here now. So you did the wrong thing. Maybe you reverted to a pattern and decided it was all in your hands. Maybe. But I was able to do it. And for how long? A month? 2? 3 days? It doesn't matter how long. The fact is, you didn't have all the tools to truly deal with alcoholism. I sighed. Okay, we'll do it your way, since I'll admit that I somehow didn't hang in there before. What do we do first? I spent the rest of the day listening to Sally's chatter. She was a former alcoholic herself, hadn't had a drink in 15 years. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who lived with her ex somewhere in Staten Island, and she was able to see them every weekend. She kept talking about her dry period and how she hadn't had a drink in 7 years. I didn't like the whole situation, besides the fact that she kept calling me an alcoholic. I had to come here every damn day for 6 weeks. She had the look of an elderly bartender and too much makeup, and the fact that it all sounded like psychedelic shit. I felt like any second she was going to start a song about Jesus and try to douse me with a vial of holy water. I felt the same way in group classes. Everyone was talking about a higher power and how it helped them with their depression. I'm as Irish and Catholic as the next Mick, and since I was 14, I've tried to forget I ever went to church, but it was all too preachy for me. So every day, Monday through Friday, I'd drive east to freaking Hauppauge and listen and sit and chat and try to figure out what was at the heart of it all. But every day passed without Myra and Jay, without Mom and her constant worrying, without Dad and his barely contained rage. I missed home, I missed work, I missed everything. But I also noticed that over time, I began to miss drinking. One day it started with a dull throbbing behind my eyes. This went on for a while, and then I noticed a hot, starchy sensation in my mouth, like my tongue was too thick or I had just eaten a mouthful of mashed potatoes. I was having a normal day, probably watching cable TV, and suddenly my brain exclaimed, "Man, I could use a beer." Whereupon my skin would get clammy, and I'd feel the warm headache from the thick tongue again. I tried to talk to Sally about it, and she said it was good. Good? How the hell is it good? She said it's a physical desire, and I should focus on it and really get to know it. That's stupid. I want to drink, you stupid bitch. I want to get rid of the urge to drink. I didn't really believe in therapy, and thought Sally and the others were probably Jesus worshippers and Reebhorns who were going to drag me back to the cross and make me vote Republican. The weather was getting colder and colder, and December was running its course. Christmas was approaching, and I was feeling more and more depressed being at home with my mom and dad instead of with my kids. I called my lawyer to ask if I could go to them sometime, and he called me back 2 days later to let me know that the social workers didn't think it was a good idea at this point and wanted me to finish the program before considering the possibility. Screw you. On December 22nd, I was having dinner with my parents when my father snapped his fork with a loud crack and stared at me. "I just heard from Myra that you didn't give her a dime for gifts for the boys this year." I looked at him, eyes wide. "I'm not allowed to see her, remember? Or my sons, remember? So your sons were going to get total shit this year until I gave Myra 200 for gifts and shit. When the hell were you going to help? How, Pops? And with what? I don't work, you know that. So get a goddamn job. You've got money in the bank. You've got gas in your goddamn car. And I know you've got unemployment money in your account. And you're going to help me? You're going to help me?" His voice growled at the end. "I want a goddamn job!" I yelled back, picking up the volume. "And if I could see my damn wife, I'd love to help with Christmas. Don't you dare raise your voice in my house." My father's face was turning increasingly red, and his eyes had strange veins in them, like he was about to have an aneurysm. "You didn't offer shit. Shane, you have pressure." Mom tried to calm Dad down, but he already had his head full of air. "Jesus, Jimmy, just put the damn money in my hands and I'll give it to her. What the hell? Don't you guys have a joint account or something? Go transfer the goddamn money. I heard Stephanie had to give Myra money for groceries this week, and you sure as hell didn't help a damn thing. Damn it, Daddy, I'm not living there. What the hell am I supposed to do? I don't have a job, I don't work, I don't have shit for money, and I have to go to these goddamn therapy sessions for alcoholics and wife beaters every goddamn day." My mom tried to defuse the situation again. "James, if you need someone to bring something to Myra, just ask." I didn't know she needed anything. "Bullshit, Jimmy," growled my dad. "What, the bills are just going to stop because you're a piece of shit in jail?" "Shane, that's enough." At that point, my mom raised her voice, not quite to the point of screaming, but loud enough to silence both my dad and me at the same time. "That won't help." "Then tell your son to get off his ass and help his family." He threw his napkin on the table and stood up. "Where do you think you're going, Shane?" "Somewhere away from him." He pointed at me the same way you'd point at a sewer rat. "Jimmy, you're my son, and you have a place to sleep. But this isn't forever, and you better figure out what's wrong in your head and fix it. Be a man, not a whining bitch." "Shane." My dad just shook his head and ran out of the kitchen. We heard his car start, and then he drove off, leaving my mom and I alone in awkward silence. "Damn it, Mom. I don't know what to do." "Jimmy, this is hard for everyone. But despite what you're going through, It's Myra and the boys who are having the hardest time. They don't deserve this, and they have the hardest job without you. Come on, Mom. I'm the one with the problems. Snap! But they're innocent, and they'll have to live with the wreckage. She bowed her head. Jimmy, I'm praying for you. I really do. I'll be fine, Mom. It's just so damn hard and unfair. Mom raised her eyes and looked at me. It's not fair to everyone, James. Not just to you. She patted my hand and left me alone in the kitchen with my thoughts. All this nonsense about what everyone else is going through. But everyone forgets that I'm the only one suffering. I went to goddamn jail. I lost my job. I can't see my kids. I can't see my wife. I have to go to these stupid therapy sessions. I'm the one who lives here with my mom and dad. And I'm the one who really wants a drink. Oh my God. I can drink. All this goddamn shit is making my head spin. I look around the corner and I don't see my mom, so she must have gone upstairs. So I tiptoed over to the cabinets and started looking through them slowly and quietly. Pasta, jars, old mugs, bowls, cake mix, spices. Shit. I looked in the lower cabinets. Mixer, pans, pots, pans, soup, rolling pin, jars of sauce, a bottle of Blackbush Irish whiskey. Bingo. I pulled it out and saw with satisfaction that the seal had been broken, and about half the bottle was gone. I listened but heard nothing, then unscrewed the cork and brought the neck of the bottle to my lips. I tilted it back until the taste of grain hit my teeth and filled the space under my tongue. I pressed my lips together, twirled the bottle in my hands, and swallowed. Oh, sweet God. It was so delicious. It hit my gut and spread in a warming wave across my chest and lungs. I suddenly felt more awake and alive because all this shit had started before Thanksgiving. I took another sip, savoring it as it flowed down my tongue and throat. Oh God, tears came to my eyes. It felt so good. I swallowed the last gulp noisily and set the whiskey on the bar. Glancing at it, I noted how much I'd roughly drunk, and then ran the neck of the bottle over the tap, refilling to the same level. I swirled the bottle to stir the contents, then sealed it and placed it carefully back in the cabinet. Not wanting to lose the feeling, I went to my old room where I was staying and lay down, staring at the ceiling. I guess that was the solution to the problem. Obviously, doing it the way the therapists, counselors, and Sally said to do it was unacceptable to me. Just going cold turkey was impossible. I would have to wean myself off of it until I could better control these damn urges. Like now, I had a couple drinks, felt really good, and had no problem closing the bottle. I can do this. I could do it. The next day and the 24th went exactly as I had envisioned. I went through the day and all the sessions, eavesdropping when needed and telling them what they wanted to hear when it was my turn to speak. And at the end of each day, I would go to the park and take a few sips from a bottle of Jameson's that I bought from a local liquor dealer. I kept the bottle under the driver's seat in my nursery and made sure I didn't drink it before therapy started so they couldn't smell it. I felt better, more in control of my life when I was doing things my way. My mind was getting sharper and my attention was getting more attentive. I felt good. Really good. Finally, December 25th came. Christmas morning. In my family, it's the next most important holiday after Easter. But ever since I had kids, the two holidays had sort of switched places. And my damn parents were going to go to Myra's to spend it with the boys. So what am I supposed to do while everyone is at my house celebrating the holiday with my family? I asked, while Mom and Dad got their coats ready. Jimmy, we'll be gone until about 4:30, Mom reassured me as she wrapped a scarf around my neck. Then we'll come home, and we'll have more than enough leftovers for you. And if you cared so damn much, you'd support them, Dad grumbled. I never heard how you funded Myra's account, sent her a damn envelope of money, or paid the bill. I don't have anything to give. She has savings, and I'm sure she's using them. Besides, she still lives in this house and works. I don't. Dad only frowned. You really are a piece of work, Jimmy. I can't believe you're my damn son. He looked at Mom. Come on, Mary. Let's get the hell out of here. Mom leaned over and kissed my cheek. Merry Christmas, Jimmy. Don't let it get you down. I watched them walk away, my vision blurred from the flood of tears, until their car drove off. As soon as they were out of sight, I walked over to the kitchen cabinet and started rummaging through it until I found a bottle of Dad's whiskey. To hell with them. To hell with all of them. I drank it straight from the bottle and nearly passed out from the euphoria spreading across my skin. Yes, This was the stuff. Exactly what I needed. I walked out of the kitchen and headed into the family room where I turned on the TV to watch the Macy's parade. As the glowing sensation began to fade from my mind, I set the bottle aside and took another drink, resuming the sensation and preparing myself for a new stretch of time. Time. What the hell was I doing? I was wasting time, that's for sure. Therapy was a waste of time, and I wasn't getting anything out of it. Swallowing. Sally was trying, you could tell, but she was kind of spinning her wheels with me, and I suspected she knew it. And it only made her try even harder to get me to take that great first leap, as she called it. Swallow. I didn't need to jump, or even freaking pull away. I was fine, and once the courts were satisfied that I had completed the program, I could bond with my sons again and go home to Myra. Myra. I could feel the sadness building up in my soul as I thought about how much I missed her. Swallow. How much I loved her. Swallow. Damn it, I felt depressed. I needed to get this shit over with, come home and show Myra that I could be the man she'd always loved. I can fix this. I know I can, but only if I can actually go home and do it. Sip. Damn, the bottle must be more empty than I thought. I went back into the kitchen and looked around to see if there was anything else. A bottle of white Zinfandel, a quarter bottle of Captain Morgan's, and some sherry. I don't drink sherry. I pulled out the Captain Morgan and shook it up. It's almost full. Okay, that's enough. I'll go later and buy a replacement. I sat inside while Miley Cyrus performed some song on stage near Times Square and drank the Captain in small sips, glancing at the TV but not really watching anything. I need a job. Now would be a good time to get a job on someone's construction crew. I know a lot of construction workers, and it wouldn't be hard to get one of them to hire me. I know I'll be on par with the guys they're recruiting at Boss Bagel and Bethpage. Swallow. And then when I start making the big bucks and gain experience, I can look for my own jobs. Nothing big to small projects like hanging windows or doing trim work. Swallow. Hell, I'd even do some spackling, it's not that hard. I've seen crews of spacklers come in here and most of them didn't speak English and didn't seem like the smartest. If they can do it, I know I can do it too. Swallow. Later. Then Myra will be proud of me, and so will the boys. I'll have my own truck, I'll name my company something like 3J Construction, because I know my sons would love to join me. Swallow. Some of these guys weren't the best, and I know I can beat them. Yeah. Then Myra will be proud. And she'll have nice clothes like Grace, and I'll have a nice house like Jerry, and they'll come and say, "Wow, Jimmy, this is really nice. We love your house." Swallow. And then they'll be jealous and envious of me and my family. Hell yeah. Swallow, swallow, shit. Is it 2 o'clock already? And where the hell is the rest of the Captain? Damn, now I think I spilled it, it's empty. Nah, the floor's dry. So where the hell is he? Shit. I'll go and get another one. But it's Christmas, so I guess the liquor stores are closed late. I'll go out later and get one. But first I'm really hot and I want to take a nap. Yeah. It's nice here. I squeezed my shoulders harder into the chair and leaned back with my feet on the ottoman. That's life, Jimmy. And a very good one at that. What the hell is that? That's what I heard at the same time as something hit me hard on the head, waking me up from the slumber I'd briefly lingered in. When I woke up, I saw my father standing over me with his coat open, his face flushed and his chest heaving. There was anger in him. Real, deep-hidden, iron anger. Right behind him, I saw my mom standing in the entrance with her hands over her mouth and a big brown Bloomingdale's bag at her feet. Huh? I asked, struggling to come to my senses and trying to sit up. You pathetic, drunken shit. Pops reached over and slapped me again, making my head ring and causing me to stumble backwards onto the couch. Are you out of your mind? Have you been drinking? Here? He pulled me away and hit me from behind again, this time catching my ear where it burned. Hey, stop it! I yelled back, scrambling my arms and legs under me and trying to get up. He lunged forward again, delivering another open-handed blow to my head and face. It hurt like hell. Jimmy Skelly, you're a goddamn disgrace. How dare you drink? How dare you do that? What the hell is wrong with you, you bastard? He recoiled to hit me again, but I felt the anger in my gut, fueled by the alcohol I'd drunk earlier, suddenly burst out and coiled around my limbs, fueling me with his rage. I jerked back and caught his flailing hand in mine, stopping it before it connected. "Don't you dare hit me!" I growled, moving closer to his face. "Don't you ever, goddammit, don't you dare! You ungrateful piece of shit!" He growled back, spittle flying off his lips and splattering me. "This is my house." He yanked his hand out of my grip and was about to slap me again when suddenly everything went to shit. All I know is that I'm not going to take another slap from my father. At all. I don't even know when I clenched my fist. All I know is that in an instant, his hand darted back to deliver another blow to me, and then he was on the ground, holding his bulging stomach and trying to catch his breath. As for me, I froze in my final pose, right fist outstretched, body slightly hunched, chest heaving like I'd run half a mile. And it was obvious. I had just punched my dad. "Oh shit, Pops!" I exclaimed, suddenly ashamed of myself. "Oh my God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I just so—" "Get out," he growled, gaining enough air to finally answer me. He held onto his knee with one hand and a chair with the other to keep from falling. Mom clasped her arms around his chest and tried to lift him up, her eyes ghostly and wild as she looked back and forth between us and him. He took another shuddering breath and said, "I want you to leave. Now. Get out of my house, Jimmy." "Shane, please!" cried Mom. "Dad, Like an ancient Irish warlord, my father stood to his full height, red and gray hair fluttering over his ruddy face, chest heaving, body shaking, and voice roaring, "Get out of my damn house now!" I froze, unable to believe what had just happened. Then I turned and ran upstairs to my room, grabbed my bags and threw all my clothes in them. I moved my toiletries into the other suitcase and slung them both over my shoulder while my father's voice came from the family room. "Get out! Get out, Jimmy! Get out!" I went downstairs and ran past my father, ignoring his yelling as I walked through the cold to my Charger and threw my meager belongings into the back seat. Opening the driver's side door, I climbed in and started the car as I suddenly heard my mom's voice. "Jimmy, wait!" I rolled down the window as she ran up to the car, her face flooded with tears and her heart visibly broken. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. I've ruined everything. I'm so sorry. It just happened." I felt myself losing control of myself, starting to go pale, my vision floating. "Jimmy, please, just take care of yourself. Give your father a few days to calm down, okay? It was just a mistake, a terrible mistake. It's Christmas, Jimmy. Things went wrong and got out of control." "Mary," shouted his father from the house. "I'll be there soon." Mom pressed something into my hand, and I noticed it was a wad of scattered $20 bills. "Here. Take care of yourself and call me. Let me know where you are and how you're doing. I'll take care of your dad and you'll be home before New Year's, okay?" I felt a queasy feeling in my stomach. "Mom, I can't take it. You'll get through this. Accept it, Jimmy. You find a place to sleep, go to a friend's house, and call me every day no matter what." "Mary." She looked over her shoulder, then leaned into the car, hugged me tightly, and pressed her tear-drenched cheeks against mine. "I love you, Jimmy. No matter what happens or what's going on, your father and I love you." "Mary? Go," she commanded, squeezing me one last time. "Be safe, Jimmy. Go." As I passed her, I saw my dad come out of the house, looking like a scared bear, and rush across the lawn toward my mom and me. I put the Dodge in reverse, slid out of the driveway, and then shifted the gear into first and drove off, scattering road crumbs and burning rubber. The rest of my family stayed behind me in the rearview mirror. Next chapter. I drove, having absolutely no idea where I was going next. The clock on the dashboard read 5:13, and it was Christmas Day. My head was foggy, like I was still trying to wake up. My thoughts were unfocused and scattered. All I could honestly say was that I hit the wall. Hard. And with malicious intent. Shit. I drove aimlessly for a while until I was near the middle school. It was quiet there, not even any security guards or police officers in sight. I pulled over near the football field and parked as close to the bleachers as possible. Then I climbed into the back seat, slid into my dark blue jacket, and pulled back the hood. Digging under the seat, I pulled out the bottle of whiskey that lay there and took a sip. For the first time in a long time, the drink didn't give me an instant burst of energy. Sure, I felt better after a sip, but I didn't feel better on the inside where it mattered. Then I took another sip. Nope, same thing. By the time I took a third drink, I was furious that I couldn't get anything out of the alcohol I was ingesting. Why isn't it working? What was wrong with it? I could feel hot tears boiling in my eyes, falling down my face like twin streams of acid burning my flesh. And that's when I cried. I cried like I don't remember crying before. Here I was, sitting in my Charger behind the school on Christmas Day, in the bitter cold, torn away from my wife and kids, with no one to turn to, and having just been kicked out of my parents' house after hitting my father. I had no job and no one I could call. And it was pulling me, tearing me apart, dropping me so far down that I couldn't see the sky above my head. I clutched the bottle to my chest, rocking back and forth in my chair, and heavy sobs burst out of me. It hurt, really hurt. My legs gave out, and I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep warm and keep my sanity in the silence of my despondency. I couldn't imagine ever feeling this sad, and I couldn't imagine ever wanting to feel this awful again. It was in this state of sadness and misery that I slipped out of consciousness and fell asleep. The sound of the cold winter wind whipping against the metal posts of the bleachers played harmony with the melody of the moans and sobs that tiredly escaped my lips. I awoke slowly. Something was irritating my eyes. Tapping, continuous tapping like pebbles in a tin can. One after another. Falling, falling. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. And against the brightness of the world beyond my eyes. I turned my neck slightly, and then it was as if I'd been pierced by 1,000 volts. The cold crept into my bones and froze me in place. I groaned and tried to stretch my stiff back and shoulders, trying to bring myself back to the world of the living. I was so cold. My hands, face, and ankles were numb from being out in the still cold air of late December for so long. I opened my eyelids and tried to look around, but the blinding light from the side window pierced my skull like a barbed thorn. "Hey, buddy, you okay?" Groaning, I tried to rise to my feet, but instead my guts sprang outward. My stomach rumbled, but luckily I hadn't eaten anything lately, so I was able to restrain myself from giving myself a hard time. Looking to my left, I saw the outline of a man in a coat and police cap shining a flashlight through my window with a concerned expression on his face. I leaned forward and started my baby. The engine roared and air, cold at the moment, rushed out of the vents. Then I slowly pressed the power window button and let the automatic shutter finish the job for me. A stream of cool but fresh air filled the interior of the Charger and helped me focus. "Yeah," I wheezed, coughing to clear my throat. "Yeah, I'm fine. You know this isn't a parking lot. You can't stay here." I took a closer, more vigilant look at my overnight guest. It was a Nassau policeman in his mid-50s. He was wrapped in his police coat, but still looked like a policeman. "I'm sorry, officer," I said in a firmer voice. "I wasn't planning on stopping here." He studied my face, shining a flashlight on it and the interior of my car. He noted my hastily packed bags thrown haphazardly on the back seat, my somewhat unkempt appearance, and finally the empty bottle of Jameson whiskey lying on the passenger seat. In a burst of sudden compassion I hadn't expected, he asked, "Are you okay? Don't you have anywhere else to go?" I wasn't going to break down in front of this cop. No way. So I took a pause to gather my thoughts before answering. "Yes, officer, I'm fine. And no, I have nowhere to go at the moment." He looked at me, pursing his lips and deep in thought. I hoped he would just give me a break. Please, just leave me alone. "Well," he said slowly, "it's almost 11:30, and you really shouldn't be here. I really should ask you to leave." "Oh, shit. Shit. Damn it." After a long pause, he continued, "But it's Christmas, and no one's going to be here unless they have to be. Tell you what, I'll come here again at 6 and ask you to move out. Then you'll have time to get some sleep and drink this," he pointed to a bottle of whiskey, "out of your system." "Oh, gods. Thank you, officer. I really do. Thank you." "It's all right, son." He turned the flashlight away. "Just do yourself a favor and start the car every now and then to keep warm. It's going to get cold soon." He paused. "Are you sure I can't take you somewhere?" I shook my head. "No. Honestly, thank you very much. But it'll be fine. Really." "Okay." He turned to leave. "If anything, Merry Christmas." I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat. "You too, officer." I watched him slowly turn around in the parking lot and drive away, leaving me in the lonely darkness. I got in the car and let the heater warm up the interior before turning off the engine again. Digging around in the trunk, I pulled out a couple sweatshirts and pulled them on. Then I laid on my back again and stared out the window at the sky overhead, just watching the darkness and letting myself fall asleep. When I woke up, it was still just as dark. But this time I wasn't as startled to see a policeman banging on the window. I started the car and opened the window. "Hello, officer." "Hello, son. You feeling better?" I nodded. "Much. Thanks. I hate to do this, but I'm half asking you to move on." "That's not a problem, officer. I'm on my way." "Good luck with that." Buckling up, I drove slowly out of the school parking lot and headed back to Main Street. There, I drove slowly down the road until I spotted Dunkin' Donuts. Not much was still open the morning after Christmas at 6:30, so I happily grabbed what I could. I went inside, had a coffee, and ate 2 egg sandwiches. After refreshing myself, I asked the woman to bag me 6 donuts, paid the bill, and walked out, heading towards Jerry and Grace. I stopped in front of their house and sat for a few minutes, wondering if I should go to the door. Finally, I mustered up the courage, walked down the driveway, and knocked on the door in 2 series of 3 sharp knocks. Some movement was heard inside, and then the door was opened by Jerry in a robe and shorts. "Jimmy? Damn it, Jimmy!" He stepped forward, hugged me tightly, and clapped me on the back a few times. I returned the greeting, and it felt so good that someone was happy to see me. "Dude, you're just beautiful! Come on in, come on in!" He led me inside and called out, "Grace, Jimmy's here." "Thanks, Jerry." I offered him the donuts. "Merry Christmas. I don't want to come over so early." "Don't think about it. Come on in." I followed him into the kitchen, where he turned on the coffee maker and placed the bag of donuts on the table. "I heard from Myra about a week ago." A chill ran down my spine. "Oh. Yeah, I've been looking for you. Grace and I were having a pre-Christmas party and wanted to invite the 4 of you. She said you were having some trouble and living with your parents." I swallowed, my mouth dry. "Yeah. It was hard." "I can imagine." He shook his head. "Shit, buddy. I can't even imagine what you're going through." "Listen, Jerry. I need one favor from you." "What's that?" I hesitated, then squared my shoulders. "I need a place to sleep for the night." I saw his gaze unfocus and his mouth go slack, and it made me continue. "Just a couch, and only for a few days. 2, 3 at the most." Jerry thought for a moment, then nodded. "Not a problem, buddy. I'm mostly free during the week, so it'll be fine. Now I'll clear things up with Grace, and you can stay here." "Clear what up?" His wife walked in, dressed in a sport shirt and pants, and leaned over to kiss me on the cheek. "Hey, Jimmy. I heard what's going on. I'm so sorry." "Thanks, Grace." "Honey," Jerry said, "Jimmy needs somewhere to stay for a few days, and I told him he could stay with us if that's okay with you." Grace gave her husband a 100-watt smile and replied, "Sure, honey. I'll get the sheets for you, Jimmy." She looked me over, noting my out-of-shape condition. "Would you like to use the bathroom and freshen up? Take a shower?" "Oh, gods, Grace. That would be wonderful. Would you mind?" She giggled. "Not at all. Let me get you some towels." The shower felt really nice. The water was hotter than I was used to, and the shampoo wasn't the $99 shampoo we'd been using for the past few years. When I was done, I didn't want to bother my friends, but I needed to tidy up my clothes, so I asked if I could use the washer and dryer. They graciously agreed, and I loaded up the stuff. During the day, when they weren't busy with Brittany, their daughter, or something that needed to be done, I had the opportunity to tell Jerry what was happening to me, but from my perspective. He listened silently, and I appreciated that he mostly kept his advice to himself. However, it was obvious to me that he was already prejudiced against Myra after hearing some of his leading questions and comments. "Wow, but don't you think maybe she was right?" "I can understand that. But I think that when it comes to children, she should have acted on her conscience first and foremost. I can't imagine that therapy isn't working at all, since they're having such success. I'm sure your parents were only hoping for help, and they're hurting too." On the 27th, Jerry had to take a few hours off work because his company was on a half day during Christmas break, and I had a couple hours to kill before driving to Phoenix House. Grace was tending to Brittany when the dishwasher buzzed, and she asked me if I could be nice and empty it for me. I rolled off the couch, emptied the plates and glasses, and put them away in the cabinet. I did the same with the silverware, tossing it into a drawer, then finished the job and returned to the couch. A little while later, I heard her fumbling around in the kitchen, as if looking for something, and then the same sounds came from the dishwasher. I focused my attention on Maury for a while and tried to ignore the knocking. At 11, I thanked Grace for her time and told her I'd be home after 4:30 when therapy was over. She waved goodbye to me, but I don't think I heard her say anything. Strange. Sally tried to get information out of me, but I wasn't going to go into a diatribe about the crap I'd said on vacation with my parents. Just said that we'd had some tough times, but they were behind us now. The end of the day was not long in coming, and I took a leisurely drive back to Jerry and Grace's place. Stopping near the park, I drank the 2 bottles of beer I had in my trunk, trying to stick to my plan of weaning myself off alcohol. By the time I got back to the Zaveras, I was feeling much better than usual and happier. Jerry was a little colder today, and Grace seemed less happy than she had the day before. I tried not to disturb them and got a good night's sleep on their couch. The morning of the 29th came, and Jerry stopped to chat with me while I was in the kitchen eating frosted cereal for breakfast. "Hey, buddy. How was your night?" I swallowed my cereal and nodded my head. "Pretty good, man. Thanks for asking." "Good. Good." He looked at his watch. "Listen, Grace's mom is coming to visit us for a week or so on New Year's Eve, and it's kind of a pain in the ass, you know?" I chuckled. "Yeah, Stephanie and I didn't exactly get along." "Tell me about it. Look, I have to keep the peace, and when she leaves, it's total domination of my time and home. I hate to do this, but do you think you'd go back to your parents while she's here?" "I just can't do anything when she's here, and you'd be very uncomfortable." I shrugged. "I'm not going back to mom and dad right now. Dad's keeping me from going crazy, and that's not enough time yet." Taking another spoonful, I thought about my situation. "I can call Brian and see if he'll let me stay with him for a while." Jerry smiled, and I felt relieved that I could help my buddy out like that. So, before leaving for Phoenix House, I packed up all my stuff, thanked Jerry and Grace for their hospitality, gave Jerry $20 to thank him for feeding me and letting me use their shower, bathroom, and such, and headed off for treatment. After treatment, I went to Brian's and talked him and his wife Laura into letting me stay there until New Year's Eve. I promise. Laura was not a pleasant person. She judged Brian, didn't drink or smoke, and looked down on those who did drink. I was there for 2 days and had to admit that I found it very difficult not to call his wife names, but to be friends with Brian. It was New Year's Eve, December 31st, and I left my next buddy's house, contemplating whether I should go to Tim's or drive to Patchogue to stay with Scott. I still talk to my mom every day, and even though my dad didn't talk to me at all, we still managed to talk about everything. Also, all my mail still came to my parents' house until I found a new place to live. Unemployment applications, and all the papers from the court. Mom had just told me about Myra's official request for child support, which was due by January 4th at 25% of all my income, including unemployment. "Mom," I said in despair, "that's a load of crap. I'm already barely getting $300 a week from the government, and I'm supposed to give her $75 of that? Can they do that?" "I don't know, Jimmy, but Myra is totally desperate. Your father and I helped as much as we could, and I realize her boss took pity on her and gave her more hours. But there are enough extra hours as it is, and when she works, either her mom or I have to babysit." I sighed. It would all go away if the social workers would just let me come home. "Jimmy, they'll do it when they're ready, not a minute sooner. I don't see how I can afford to give her this money. I practically live in my car as it is." "I don't know, son, but this is quite an official letter, and I wouldn't ignore it if I were you." "Okay, Mom. I'll call my lawyer and see if I have to do it. If he says yes, then so be it, even if it's bullshit. Keep me in the loop, Jimmy. I love you and Happy New Year. Let's hope next year is better." "Me too, Mom. Happy New Year to you and Dad, too." I chuckled. "Are you going to make it to midnight this time?" She laughed. "I will. We'll be sitting with Jay and Jay tonight, and they'll want to beat pots and pans." "All night?" "Yes. Myra will have a much-needed evening with her friends. The poor thing has been on fire at both ends for a while now. That's why your father and I have agreed to watch the boys in her place." That worried me. "So she can go out with her girlfriends for a night on the town, and I try to organize a dinner at Bracco's 3 months ago, and she blows me off? That's bullshit, Mom. Plain and simple." "James," my mother's voice grew firmer. "Myra has been a single parent and caregiver for some time now. She has children's services, attorney issues, home-related stress, lack of money, and extra time at work, in addition to all her normal day-to-day stuff. In this case, we're glad she's gone on vacation. Maybe, I grumbled. But it still sucks. I don't know what you want me to say, Jimmy. Mom sighed into the phone. Look, just have a good night and call me tomorrow to tell me where you are, okay? Okay. Good night, Mom. Good night, Jimmy. I drove to Phoenix's house, anger slowly building up inside me again. What the hell is all this happy shit? I'm looking for a place to live, and Myra's doing what the hell does she do on New Year's Eve? And for that matter, with who? My blood ran cold, and the viper in my veins suddenly gained wings. What if it's the guy she's dating? Bullshit. That's the point. Bullshit. My time with Sally couldn't have been less productive if my balls weren't on fire. She chatted nonstop and finally, giving me a hard look, asked, "So, James, you haven't been focused this whole time. Is there something wrong? Anything? You can tell me." "No, Sally. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I guess it's just almost a new year. New beginnings. We only have a week or two left, and then the court will let me see the kids and my wife." She frowned, her eyebrows coming together. Oh, God. Oh, God, no, James. It's not really like that. The anger I'd been struggling to contain suddenly burst out, turning into a mixture of cold and hot rage. I could feel the fire in the depths of my eyes ignite as I glared at the older woman with ill-contained feelings. What do you mean by saying it doesn't work quite like this? I've been coming here every day for a month now. With a week or two to go, the 6-week requirement is met. That's what I was told. That's what was supposed to happen. James, we're here to make sure you stay calm and manage your alcoholism. She pointed at me. See this? Every time I say alcoholic or another similar word in reference to you, you wrinkle your nose and narrow your eyes. That tells me you don't like the term and that you don't think you are one. Because I've seen real alcoholics, and I'm not one of them. All this shit grew out of a fight my wife and I had. The cops got involved, the courts got involved, and now my life is a train wreck and I'm trying to get off the tracks and out of the way. James, you're in charge of your own life. If something affects it in a way you don't like, more often than not it's because of your own choices. She sighed. As for the trial, sure, the 6-week program will be over soon for you, but I can't in good conscience tell the powers that be that you've successfully understood and accepted the situation. What? What? Shit! I stood to my full height, clasping my hands at my sides. Do you realize what you're saying? I could feel the tension building. Do you know what this is doing to me? I couldn't see well out of my left eye. It was blurry and a red haze obscured my vision. Do you have any idea what you're doing to me? I have to hand it to Sally. She sat there looking at me like I was a volcano. The only thing that changed was the look on her face, but otherwise she waited for my last words to echo. And that, James, is a perfect example of why you're not ready. You're an ugly prude with the face of a cow. You're a pathetic ex-drunk, pouting whore. I said nothing. I turned around, grabbed my coat and walked out, heading for my baby girl where I started her up, twisted the steering wheel to the left, and rubber-stamped my way out of the parking lot and onto the Northern State Highway. God damn it, I was pissed. That damn bitch had basically deprived me of the opportunity to get home. How dare she? How the hell did she dare? All right, calm down, Jimmy. Calm the hell down. Oh, shit. The trip to Sagdaco's coming up. What the hell? What speed am I going? 96? 96 miles an hour. Whew. Just what you need right now, Jimmy. A goddamn ticket. Put your car away. And where are you going to live then? In a box under a bridge. I took my foot off the gas pedal and slowed down, keeping the charger just above 60. Where am I going? I don't have anywhere to go. Do I need to go anywhere? I reached behind me, grabbed a beer, popped the cork, and drank it in short sips. Yeah, it's a stupid idea, I know that. But the hell with it, I'm too worked up, and the beer will help me focus. No one paid any attention to me as I drove, one of many cars rushing down the streets on New Year's Eve. But I turned onto Wanta Avenue and drove slowly through my neighborhood. What the hell, Jimmy? What are you looking for? Are you going to drive by the house? I opened another mug of beer. You got a warrant out on you, you can't go in there. Hell, I just want to make sure Myra's not seeing another guy. That's not right. Never. I turned left into my neighborhood and let the car idle past the neighbors' houses, creeping up on my own house. There were no holiday lights here this year, but she'd managed to hang a few paper ornaments on the windows and hang a wreath on. I saw that her Kia was parked in the driveway, and the driver's side taillight was broken and covered with clear tape. When had this happened? Damn, another piece of crap that needs to be fixed. There was another car in the driveway, a Nissan Sentra I didn't recognize. Who the hell was that? And in the driveway? In my spot? Who the hell had been there? I dropped the empty can into the paper bag and pulled out the last one. The last one? Heck, I'd had 5 of these cans since I'd left Phoenix House. I put the unopened can down and opened the car door, turning around and standing in the apron of my driveway. Come on up, Jimmy. Go on. Get over there. See what's going on? Go on, boy. You ought to know. I didn't move from my spot, afraid to go up there, afraid of what I might find there, and most of all afraid of the destructive anger I was struggling to cage. And so I stood there as the minutes passed, my pulse boiling and pounding. And then my front door opened. There she was, Myra, my Myra. She stood there in her black dress and high-heeled shoes. A fancy handbag from TJ Maxx was clutched in her hand, and her white winter coat was open. Her hair was loose and spread in auburn waves across her face. 3 other people came out with her, 2 women and 1 man. The woman I recognized from her work, but the guy was unfamiliar to me. Who the hell was he? And why was he in my house? As they chatted and walked down the driveway to the Nissan, the first woman stopped, looked at me in surprise, and said, Myra, I think someone is here to see you. Myra looked up and stopped, her mouth open in shock. Oh my God, Jimmy! We looked at each other, and all I felt was love for my wife. It had been so long. So long. And here she was looking so beautiful. And then this guy ruined it by opening his mouth and asking, Myra, are you okay? And then, noticing her obvious horror at the sight of me, stepped toward her to shield her from me and continued, Do you want me to rid you of that joker, Myra? Myra? She has a pet name now, you bastard! Hey, asshole, I growled. This is my house and this is my wife. Get the hell out of here and mind your own business. Myra, one of the women said, standing up beside her and pulling out her cell phone. You still have a protection order against him. I'm calling the police. She turned to me and said louder, Can you hear me? I'm calling the police, Mr. Skelly. You should go away and leave Myra alone. The guy waved his arms around, trying with his limp wrists to get me to leave my goddamn property. Go away. Get out of here. Leave Myra alone. Go away. What the hell? Am I a cat? And he kept coming toward me while my wife shook her head and repeated, No, 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 over and over. This guy looked like a threat. A threat to me, a threat to my marriage, and a threat to my damn sanity. There's only one way to deal with a threat. I took a step toward him, raising my fists, and he sort of stumbled, trying to slow down. His left hand jerked back and I saw him clench his fist. I knew the poor bastard was a runner, a gym guy, and had no idea how to fight or throw punches. I let him go first, and his unskillful punch went through my head and ear, bouncing off my shoulder. Dick. No sooner had I made first contact than the broad with the cell phone wailed, Let my husband go. Let him go. Husband? I looked at him with bloodshot eyes. The poor son of a bitch, clutching at my wrist and tiptoeing up to relieve the pressure on my scalp, was frantically trying to break free. His wife, oblivious to the fact that she was going to call the police, was thrashing back and forth, wavering between coming to me to save her lover and staying away from me. And the last woman was comforting my wife. I had made a serious mistake. Shit. I let the poor bastard go, no longer crowning him, and he collapsed to the ground, naked tears running down his cheeks. I gotta go. I ran to my Charger, jumped in the driver's seat, and sped down the block as fast as I could hit the gas. Goddamn shit, goddamn stupid bastard, Jimmy. You really are a shit. You stupid Irish asshole. What the hell were you thinking? Was this a good idea? Was it supposed to solve the problems and get you two back together? Hell, you could have beaten that guy to death and then gone to jail forever. Driving through the tears was getting harder and harder, but I made my way through the streets until I was in front of Tim's house. I sat there until I felt more confident. Then I went and knocked on the door. Tim answered, the smell of grass clinging to his clothes. Jimmy? Hey, man. Seeing me, he sobered up a little and reached forward to shake my hand and give me a big hug. What brings you out here? Tim, I need a place to crash for the night. Damn, man. You came to the right place. My house is your house. Come on in. I sat in Tim's mom's cluttered living room and told my best buddy about everything that had been going on for the past couple months. He listened with an open heart, not judging and just offering his support. When I was done, there was nothing left of me. I was like a wrung out sponge, the tattered remains of some dog's chew toy. Tim, I know it's New Year's Eve, but do you think I could get some sleep, buddy? He looked around and wrinkled his nose. My mom will be home later and wants to use the living room. Let's get you downstairs. The basement's pretty clean after Thanksgiving. I followed my buddy down 12 stone steps into the cool and slightly damp space of his basement. We'd spent a lot of time here in our youth, sometimes with girls, sometimes with beer. Everything was the same: an old couch, a low table, a battered refrigerator, a foosball table in the corner. Only everything was a little shabbier, more tired, like me. Tim peeled the ugly blue sheet off the couch and rummaged through the closet for a blanket and pillow. Here, dude. Lie here for a while. As soon as you feel ready, let me know, and we'll go do something. Jimmy and Timmy, round two. He chuckled as I kicked off my shoes and leaned my head back, already drifting into sleep. I woke up early in the morning and went upstairs to take a leak. The house was quiet, and I couldn't hear what was going on outside. Gasping, I made my way to Tim's kitchen and saw an open bag of cheap Lay's chips. I ate them in big handfuls, filling an old coffee mug I'd picked up off the counter with tap water to wash them down. When the knot on my boyfriend loosened a bit, I looked around for something else to eat or drink, and was surprised to find a 6-pack of Heineken bottles in the fridge. I drank one while I was standing there and took the other to the basement. There, in the dark, I sipped the beer and hated myself for doing it. I hate myself so much. I can't stop, I just can't. I don't want to be like this, I really don't. But I don't know what to do, and everything I try to do blows up all around me. Here I am in the darkness of my friend's house, in his basement, drinking a beer I took from his fridge, and I have nothing to brag about being here. Nothing but a stifling thirst that's trying to take me to hell. In the darkness, I raise the bottle to the ceiling and toast in that direction. You have won, God. I surrender. And then I drank it down to the bottom. The next few days were the last coherent days I could remember in recent memory. I asked Tim to come with me to the orphanage and take what little I still had to his mom. I made a deal with Tim's mom that I would stay out of her way until I got myself cleaned up, a week tops, and give her $50 or so to help her out. I always thought Tim's mom was kind of a white trash kind of girl, but she gladly accepted my money and admonished, "Keep the hell down, stay the hell out of my basement, and if you get sick, clean up after yourself." I know I've been drinking. I almost always drank Bud and cheap whiskey. Every couple days, Tim and I would go to the local store and stock up on liquor, and then go back outside, laugh, drink, and pass out. One day, my phone stopped working, and I sold it to one of Tim's friends for $30, which I then spent on more booze. After a while, I didn't dare start my baby girl, as I couldn't keep a clear head while driving. Instead, I drove her into the backyard and left her sitting in a rut day after day, week after week. I stopped going to Phoenix House when I told Sally off, and I had no idea what that meant in terms of the court case. I didn't really care. I just lived alone, day in and day out, drinking, chilling, staring at the basement walls and what passed off as a TV. I knew I had money in my bank account, as my debit card was constantly topped up with beer and snacks, which meant unemployment kept coming in. In reality, I just existed, immersed in my own thoughts. If I thought about Myra, I drank to dull the pain. If I thought of John and Joel, the pain in my heart almost demanded that I somehow kill her. It was flashes of memories, things I seemed to remember in the moment, like how I laughed at something I thought was funny on Jon Stewart's show and ended up shitting my pants. Tim took me for a ride once when he had pot money, and a guy we met at Roosevelt Field had a lip ring connected by a chain to an eyebrow ring. I thought it was the funniest thing ever, and laughed in his face until he told Tim to take me out of there and never bring me back. I had to carry the box down the stairs once, but I somehow forgot to button my pants, and they slid down to my ankles when I walked down the stairs. I got all the way to the bottom and laughed myself silly, and Tim looked at me like I had 3 heads. Very funny. Funny, but pathetic. But it was a trip to the hospital that helped bring me out of that state. Apparently, I was in the shower and I got sick. I slipped and hit my head on the back of the tub, making a damn loud noise, and ended up throwing up as I lay there. It lodged in my throat, and I choked and gasped, choking on my own whiskey-filled vomit. I couldn't stand, and was already passing out when Tim kicked open the door, and before I passed out, I saw him rushing to my aid. When I woke up, I was in Nassau University Hospital in East Meadow, with a bunch of bandages on my head, an IV in my arm, and the worst hangover I had ever experienced. I tried to get up, but a soothing hand laid me back on the bed and suggested I sleep. Who was I to argue? The next time I woke up, it was daylight, and a real ugly nurse was shaking me by the shoulder. "It's time to take your medicine, Mr. Skelly." Huh? What's wrong? She handed me some pills and a cup of water for me to swallow, then started measuring my vitals. "You've been here for 3 days, Mr. Skelly. Concussion, severe laryngeal trauma, asphyxiation, and alcohol poisoning. We have reconstructed your system, and you are on the mend. If the doctor agrees, you could be discharged as early as tomorrow." Oh. "Your mother and father have been here for the past 2 days. Your friend Tim was here the first day. There have been other visitors." She pointed to a side table, and I turned my head to look. There were little bags of cookies and postcards lying there that I was supposed to look at as soon as I woke up. But what made me gasp and sob were the hand-drawn cards in crayon on folded yellow paper that showed my two boys with figures next to a larger figure lying down. My sons were here. They were here, which meant Myra was here, and they had seen me in this state. The nurse tried to calm me down as I sobbed and moaned and cried. Eventually, other people came in. Something happened that calmed me down, and within seconds, I was asleep. When I woke up the next time I saw Mom and Dad at my bedside, Mom looked so tired and drained, and Dad, he just looked old, sad, hollow. I swallowed to wet my tongue and wheezed. "Hi." They both looked at me and smiled with relief. "Hi, Jimmy." "Hey, son." I sighed, drawing strength from God knows where. "I'm so sorry, Dad." "Don't be," he scolded me, placing a hand on my bicep. "Don't you dare start this. It's over. It happened. It's over. We're Irish, not Italian. We feel guilt, not resentment, okay?" I smiled. "Thanks, Dad." Mom smiled thinly and leaned over to kiss my cheek. "It took me so long to call you. Your phone wasn't answering, and then they said it wasn't working anymore. The courts came, Myra got sick, Jay missed you, Sally from Phoenix House reached out. Jimmy, you disappeared off the face of the earth. Didn't anyone think to call Tim? We tried, we all tried. No one answered, and eventually his phone was disconnected too." I sighed. "So how did you find me here?" "We got a call from Myra. When you were here for John and Joel's birth, you listed each other on the hospital forms as emergency contacts. The hospital called her, and she called us. And here we are." We chatted with each other some more, horrified to learn that it was already April. 4 months. I had lost 4 months somewhere, and I had nothing to brag about. Suddenly, they got distracted and said they were taking a couple minutes off to the gift store. "We'll be right back." And then they left. In the silence that followed their departure, I smelled a faint odor of coconut that seemed strangely familiar, and a voice from behind the door asked uncertainly, "James? May I come in?" I looked, and it was Myra, my wife. The smell was from her shampoo. How the hell could I have forgotten that? I reached for her as if by sheer force of will alone I could pull her to me. She took a few steps and then sped up, falling onto my chest and hugging me tightly. "Oh, Jimmy. Oh, James. Oh, Jimmy." She sobbed, and I put my arms around her and felt her shoulders shake as she let out whatever was burning inside her. "I thought you were dead." I shook my head and put my arm around her shoulders. "No, kids. I just wish I had." We lay like that for a few more minutes before she stood up and stared at me. "Where have you been?" I told her everything I could remember about the last few scattered months, and she did the same. Her story was the mirror opposite of my own, and I grew increasingly frustrated as she recounted the terrible obstacles she and the boys had to go through. She was on public assistance at the time, receiving EBT cards and other assistance from too many agencies for me to remember. The house was in danger of foreclosure, and the boys were going through some bad times, alternately missing their father and behaving inappropriately. But it was the last part of her conversation that ripped the remnants of my heart out of me. "And that's the problem, James." "What, the kids?" She sighed, looking down. James, Child Protective Services has been very hostile to me. Very hostile. Even when Mom and you were helping, they came in and said that the lives and safety of the children in the home were deteriorating. And I had nothing else to give. Nowhere else to reach out to fix the situation. She sat upright on the edge of the bed and interlocked her fingers. So I made myself a promise. If you don't come home or get better by March 15th, I'm going to have to make a hard decision. A snake of anger stirred deep in my heart, but it was so tired, so exhausted. There was so little strength in it as there had once been in my rage. Myra, it's the middle of April. What hard decision have you made? My wife stood up and took a step away from the bed, distancing herself from me as she gathered her courage. Jimmy, I filed for divorce. Thud. That was the sound of my last support falling. No, I gasped. No way! Jimmy, I have to. I have to do what's right for the boys, and for me. Tears stood in her eyes. I've been trying to get through to you for so long. There's nothing more I can do or give. I've had enough. Myra, that's not going to happen. The money never came and you were nowhere to be found. Jimmy, I love you and always will, but you killed a part of me. I could feel my molars grinding. Myra, I'm not going to give you a divorce. She stared at me, her eyes clouded and full of fear. It's not your choice, Jimmy. It's going to happen. My pulse became weak and my vision blurred. Myra, listen to me. We're Catholics. There's no such thing as divorce, do you hear me? We're married for life, in the eyes of God. Jimmy, you're not a practicing Catholic and neither am I. I tapped my hand on the bed. I don't care. You can't memorize these things from childhood. You're not going. Myra stared at me and swallowed nervously. James, I will never forbid you from going out with boys if the court agrees to it. And I mean it. You will always be the first and foremost love of my life. But you can't force me to bend to your will. No matter how much I love you, you killed a part of my heart. And everything that's happened since then has forced me to shut that part down for a while. You can't make me submit. And James, I've already had to make some hard choices. What? What do you mean? I needed help with my mortgage, and with the phone bill, and with the oil delivery. She twirled her hands again. And the product manager at work, Mark, well, it's no secret he's always liked me. No. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No, Myra. No. I haven't slept with him yet, Jimmy. She sighed, and the tears flowed freely, no sobs, just streaming down her face like a faucet. But he helped me a lot with the house and the money and the renovations. And the boys have been better behaved since he showed up. I know what he wants, and I have to give it to him as soon as possible. She sobbed sincerely. I don't have a choice. Unless I want to help our sons. The courts, the lawyers, child services, everything. You. It's all tearing us apart, James. It's time. It's time to put an end to it. Oh my God, Myra. The babies. How can I keep suffering? How can I keep suffering? Am I not done? Isn't this enough? I'm sorry. Myra, I'll never give you a divorce. Never. No matter what happens. Never. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? In sickness and in health, in riches and in poverty, in good times and in bad times, until death do us part. She bowed her head and left the room, whispering only, I love you, James. I sat down on my bed and just stared ahead. I know Mom and Dad came in, but I can't tell what they said or what I said, if I said anything at all. All I know is that the room was getting darker and darker, and I stared at the opposite wall, feeling nothing but dull, clawing agony inside me. Oh gods, I wanted to die. I wanted to drink a bottle of whiskey and then roll off a cliff and blow my brains out. That's what I wanted. Just die, goddammit. Why do you want to die, Jimmy? Huh? I blinked in the fluorescent light of the room. Obviously, the sun had already set. A middle-aged man in a dark coat and jeans sat in front of me, legs folded, with a glass of water under his arm. He adjusted his glasses and nodded at me. I asked you why you want to die. Huh? Who the hell are you? He chuckled. Boy, obviously you didn't hear a word I said. I said my name is Father Michael Baldwin. I'm a grief and alcohol counselor in the Nassau community. I was assigned your case a few days ago, but you weren't able to speak until today. Great, I muttered. Another therapist. The previous one was doing a great job. Therapy is a funny thing, Jimmy. It works wonders, but only if you're willing to go through it. Otherwise, it's the biggest waste of your life. Okay, this guy had some sense. Well, that was my last one. 6 weeks of group talking and discovery and all that fake Jesus crap. No offense, Father. No offense. He tilted his head. Where did you go? Phoenix House. They do good work, but it's not for everyone. Well, it's not for me. Then why did you go? I rested my head back on the pillow and stared at the ceiling. To get home to my wife and kids. He nodded. A good goal and lofty. Father Michael stood up and put his hand on my chest. And it's probably even more painful because it was doomed to fail. Huh? Jimmy, therapy only works if it's meant for you. If it's meant for anyone else but you, it will never work. Never. He pointed his thumb at the door. The woman who was here today and left in tears. Was that your wife? I nodded. She's leaving me. Ah, and that's why you want to die. You don't understand, Father. She's been my pillar, my support, my other half of me. We have 2 sons. But it's over. Father Michael just watched me wallow in my grief, and then walked over to the bed beside me and took a pillow from it. He then walked over to me and tried to cover my face with it. Hey! Hey! I shoved, pushing and twisting away. What the hell are you doing, Dad? Giving you what you want. Getting nowhere. He threw the pillow on the floor and stared at me. Damn it, Jimmy. If you want to die so badly, why the hell are you resisting me? What the hell kind of priest are you? Killing me? In hell? What the hell? He laughed. Jimmy, we'll get along just fine. But first things first. He suddenly reached out and slapped me hard on the right side of my face. The blow was scalding and threw my head to the side. When I straightened up to give him another slap, his opposite hand flew up and slapped me again on the left side. That was so you'd pay attention to me. His eyes were cold as he hunched over. You're paying attention to me? I nodded silently. Good. Then listen carefully. I'm here for one reason. To make you well. I'll do whatever it takes to make you realize that there's not a single damned option in which you'd be better off dead. Never. All life is precious. Every life. He jabbed a finger at my chest. And if you ever want a chance to see your kids, your wife, and everyone who has loved you, loves you, or will love you for even a minute, it's because you want to be a better person. He pointed to the pillow he'd dropped. Because if you don't make the decision to want to be better for Jimmy, you might smother yourself. Father Michael hopped off my bed and headed for the door. We'll talk tomorrow, Jimmy. You're going to be released, and you're going to live with your parents. I already have an address, and I've told them in detail about your situation and what my therapy will include. They've agreed to help and will be another part of your equation and support system when I'm not around. I stared at him, still not believing this intense guy was a priest. You've thought this through, haven't you? He smiled. No, it's up to you. He waved his hand. I'll see you tomorrow. My release the next day was strange. A representative from the sheriff's department came over and handed me a copy of the separation judgment, a modified order of protection that only allowed phone calls by appointment, but no visits, thanks Nassau County Custody Department. Jerks, and a 4-month-old restraining order on Charles Barrington, who I had no idea about until I guessed he was the same poor bastard I'd nearly beaten to a pulp on New Year's Eve. Tough day for me. The nurses were very nice and helped me out of the hospital in my wheelchair to my parents' car. I hugged them both and thanked them for putting up with me, then got in the seat behind my dad, and we drove to their house. We drove in silence. No one was talking, and I was afraid to say anything, just letting my thoughts wander. When we stopped and Dad turned off the car, the silence became so thick you could cut it. Jimmy. Yes, Dad? I asked, wondering what was on his mind. Please don't fight with me. I'm in no condition to do that right now. I love you, son. Oh, shit. And, he continued, interrupting me, under no circumstances do I want you to die or kill yourself. Shit. Father Baldwin must have talked to them. My mom sat there crying quietly, and my dad blushed and looked embarrassed at this display of emotion. Listen, I'm not going to kill myself, okay? I'm Jimmy Skelly, the stubborn and indomitable son of Shane and Mary. I laughed to myself. Seriously, I'm not going anywhere. Damn, do I really believe what I'm saying? I'm dying inside from Myra's revelation, but I don't think it's consuming me. God, I hope not. We went into the house and the three of us walked around a bit while I cleaned out my old room, again, and went through an even smaller pile of stuff. Hey, Mom, I need someone to drive me to Tim's so I can get my car and my stuff. Jimmy, about that, Mom said, with a final intonation in her voice. You shouldn't be hanging out with Tim right now. What? I stopped on my way to the bathroom to look back at her. Why? Father Mike doesn't want you around people he calls triggers, and judging by the last 4 months, he thinks Tim is one of them. Shit, Mom. He's been my friend since 5th grade. Honey, Tim may be a good friend, but no friend is going to let you do to yourself what you did. Your father and I are going to go to his house, get your car, and pick up all the stuff you left there. Oh, Mike should be here soon, and then we'll leave so you both can start therapy. I washed my hands, rolled the scale out of the bathroom, tapped it on top to activate it, and then climbed on it. 313. What the hell? I got off them, shook the scales, and checked them to make sure everything was okay. Then I took off my jeans, tossed my shirt aside, and climbed back on the scales. 307. Holy shit, Jimmy. You're over 300 pounds. You've never been over 300 pounds. When the hell did you go over 300 pounds? How the hell did that happen? Hell, I thought about it and figured I'd gained 35 pounds or so since Christmas. 35 pounds in 4.5 months. I grabbed my stomach and shook it, horrified to find that there was a lot to grab onto. God damn me. Damn, I'm turning into a fat, drunken bastard. Jimmy! Mom called out. We're going out! We'll be right back! I heard the door close and walked out of the bathroom, holding my clothes in my free hand. Feeling depressed again, I wandered into the kitchen and rummaged through the fridge looking for something to eat and made sure there was nothing there to drink. There was nothing. There was a knock on the door, and I obediently went to it, greeting Michael's father with a blank hi, and come on in. He joined me in the kitchen, where he first asked for a glass of water and then motioned for me to sit with him. So, Jimmy, are you ready for your first day or the rest of your life? I shrugged. My thoughts were elsewhere. Sure, I replied, looking out the window. Okay, Jimmy. Spit it out. What's the matter? Nothing. Nothing. He shook his head. It's not going to work that way. You're going to answer me, talk to me, and see this as your last chance at a normal life, or I'm going to walk away and you can find a less painful way to kill yourself other than alcohol poisoning. Now talk. I just found out I can't talk to Tim. Is this your friend, Tim Malix? I nodded. Jimmy, I'm sure Tim is a terrific friend in his own way, and I'd hate for you to think that you can't talk to him eventually and resume all the same antics that the two of you used to pull together. At this point, however, Tim is the trigger. He's one of those moments in your life that drives you to drink. He leaned back in his chair and continued. From my interviews and conversations, including with Mr. Malix and his mother, whose house you lived in, I can't think of a worse person to stay with during those months. He does drugs all the time, idolizes you and your drinking, and has no visible legal job. His mother is better, but she has no interest in her son's life or well-being and is emotionally detached from his situation. She works 2 jobs to keep a roof over her head for herself and her son and is rarely home during regular hours, 7 days a week, if at all. Jimmy, I promise you that if we do this for you, get you to the point where you're healthy and well-adjusted, you'll have no problem renewing your friendship with Mr. Malix and doing it the right way, not the destructive way. Okay? I nodded my head and went back to my conversation with Father Michael. Okay, I'm in. Let's get down to business, I said, with a sense of optimism. Great! Jimmy, you're a miserable alcoholic. Hey! I'm serious, he continued. You're a drunk. You're a drunk now and you'll always be an alcoholic, so you better get used to it. What kind of therapy is this? I exclaimed. You had to explain it to me slowly so I'd understand and all that other shit. I'm sorry, Father. No offense, he laughed. First of all, stop apologizing for swearing. It happens. I'm sorry, Father. I'm a recovering Irish Catholic. I can't help it, I offered with a smirk. I see. Secondly, you're looking at something that will happen much later. Right now, all we need to recognize is that you are an alcoholic. He pointed at me. See? That one there? You smirked when I said alcoholic. That's your biggest stumbling block. He sighed. James, The truth is, most alcoholics don't recognize themselves as such. They go through life blaming everyone and everything. They have a hard time accepting responsibility for their actions, and they think the world owes them something. The world owes you nothing. Nothing. No one serves you a drink. No one forces you to drink it, and no one does everything they can to affect your life and the lives of those around you with their drinking. It's done by you. Only you. I felt myself getting more upset the more he talked. I hadn't seen my boys in months. Myra was leaving me. I couldn't communicate with my oldest friend because he was a bad influence on me. I was 35 pounds overweight. I didn't have a job and had no idea what I had in my bank account. I had just spent 3 days in the hospital, and as far as I knew, I had no health insurance. And now he was telling me I was a drunk, and it was my own fault. My own. No one else's. Was it true? My heart screamed, demanding an answer, but I'd ignored it for so long. Lived so long knowing it wasn't my fault and I was in control. Me, Jimmy Skelly, inflexible and indestructible. I was in control. I could stop when I wanted to. Damn it, Jimmy. How many times have you said those words over the years? Hell, how many times have you said those words in the last few months with Myra? Hundreds? What about yourself? Thousands? But you couldn't you? You can't fix it, you can't control it. And the more you try, the worse it gets. Shit. Father Mike and I talked every day that week, and every day I came to the horrible realization that my drinking was my problem. Mine. And I was an alcoholic. I had alienated my wife, I had alienated my parents, and I took full responsibility for turning my life into the unmanageable mess it was today. On Friday, he invited me to St. William Abbot Catholic Church for my first AA meeting, and that's when I said to him, "I'm not going to be forced back into Catholicism, am I?" He laughed. "No, Jimmy. Some people think AA is a religious experience, but it really isn't. It's what you get out of therapy. So you can go over there and just meet and feel things out, and then we'll meet on Monday next week. Do you want me to drive?" I haven't driven my little girl in a long time. I can't even remember when exactly. I know she was dirty, messy, and in need of repair and refinishing, but I couldn't bring myself to leave the house, existing only in the kitchen, living room, and bedroom. There was no way I could drive. "Yeah. Do you mind?" "Not at all. I'll be back around 6:30 to pick you up." I hardly ate anything at dinner that night, my nervousness and constant trips to the bathroom driving my dad crazy. Shortly afterward, Father Mike picked me up and we drove to church in silence. It wasn't a bad church as far as churches go. White, with a steeple, a handful of people hanging around outside, smoking cigarettes and bickering in small groups. I got out of the car, adjusted my shirt. I didn't like how tight it was around my chest, and headed for the front door. Several people nodded in our direction, a few of them greeting Michael's dad by name. It surprised the hell out of me, but none of these people looked drunk. Really, none of them looked drunk. Hell, she looked like a football mom. That one could have been a goddamn accountant, and those two over there were probably playing basketball. Okay, that broad was a wreck, had too many tattoos, and looked like a freak. But damn, they looked like regular people. Eventually, someone came out and said, "There's a bunch of Bill W.'s friends gathering here if anyone's interested." I watched as most of the bums stomped in and started to go inside. I guessed Bill W. was code or some shit. Hell, is there a book on this shit I should have known before entering? Screw it! I joined the passers-by, ignoring the sweat that protruded on my palms. Luckily, we didn't enter the church part of the temple, but some sort of meeting hall off to the side. There were about 40 of us here, and there was room for 20 more if necessary. There was a heavy-set older man standing in front. He called the assembly to order, and everyone said hello. I wasn't going to say anything, just watched and followed what was going on, trying not to feel too damn scared. Courage, Jimmy. Courage. The AA meeting was an eye-opener for me. It was similar to the one I attended at Phoenix House, but maybe it was my changed mindset or something else, but it just resonated with me. I felt like I was part of the experience. Several people read part of the 12 traditions, a summary of the essence of AA. Then the speaker asked if anyone new was here, and Father Mike, who was sitting up front, turned around in his chair and looked right at me. Damn. Stand up. Stand up. Just do it. The crowd waited, looking around, some of them looking at me. I put my hands on my knees and forced myself to stand up. Me. I am. Great. Welcome. What's your name? Jimmy? Jimmy Skelly? Hi, Jimmy. The whole group greeted me in one voice. I felt my face turn red. The speaker reached out to me with his hand palm up. Would you like to tell us something about yourself, Jimmy? Yes. Too soon for me. Not right now. Some other time. Yeah, another time, Jimmy. No problem, he said with a smile, and I sat back down. Anyway, welcome. That was the end of my time in the spotlight. I didn't get burned or faint or subjected to ridicule or anything. I just said hello and felt welcome. And that was the key moment for me. I was welcomed into a room full of people who looked normal and acted normal, but every single one of them had been where I was at some point. A broken life, a bloody mess, and now, on the road to a better one. I listened to the conversations of people walking through the hall and just marveled at the shit they had been through and what their families had been through. One guy left home 3 years ago to go on a binge and somehow came back from the brink 5 months ago. That woman over there drove her car into her own living room. They each had their own pile of shit, and they were still digging through it. But that was the point. They did it every day. Every day they made the decision not to drink. They would wake up, go about their business, and at some point say, I'm not going to drink today. And they did that and lived that way. At the end, they passed around a box for people to drop whatever they could into it, and I felt like nothing because I only had 68 cents in change. The tired blonde in the next seat assured me that any change would be appreciated and that I should only give if I could afford it. Farter Mike personally escorted me to the speaker, who thanked me for coming and handed me a white poker chip, asking if I wanted to come back. Yes, I replied, surprised at my own answer. And that was my beginning. Every day I talked to my mom and dad, trying to make sense of my life and get a grip on reality. Father Michael would often come and talk to me on the phone if he couldn't make it, giving me support I didn't even realize I needed. And I went to the meetings and listened long and intently. Like Grandpa Connell used to say, take the absorbent cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth, Jimmy. Don't talk, just listen. The second week of my sobriety threatened to break my apple cart as I began to evaluate my life and the big hole I had dug for myself. The CPS staff came to the house and interviewed me, wanting to make sure I was going through some kind of program and making progress. Father Mike was there along with my mom and dad, and they were my staunchest supporters, keeping this socially active bitch at bay and mirroring her snide comments and judgmental attitude. Shit like, the kids shouldn't be exposed to negative influences right now. And it's in our best interest to keep the father away from the kids because he hasn't proven he's capable of reasonable and mature responsibility yet. To hell with you, asshole. At this point, my father surprised me. Look, he said irritably. My wife and I don't mind meeting the boys. They come here all the time. Why the hell? If you're so worried about getting sued for someone pricking their finger, you won't let Jimmy see his sons, whom he hasn't seen in 6 months. Jesus knows that can't be healthy for kids. Here, supervised? My wife, me, you, the sheriff if you want. Everyone can watch to make sure Jimmy doesn't decide to have a beer in front of the kids and then attack them. I swear, I've never heard of such nonsense in my life. He's their father, and let me tell you, he may have had some damn problems lately, but he loves his kids very much, and you're hurting them by continuing this farce. The CPS bitch said she would talk to her supervisor about it and get back to us. Farter Baldwin gave her his contact information and gently reminded her that he was part of the social workers' buddy network, or whatever it was. I had hoped that his involvement would speed up the process, but he informed me that Children's Services is the crappiest and slowest of all the social workers I have to deal with, and it could be weeks before I got any news. On my 16th day of sobriety, I walked out to my Charger for the first time in my life and cried. My mom was standing next to me as I examined my baby girl. It was dirty from bumper to bumper. There were so many scratches on the paint from rough handling, and who knows what else. There was a dent on the driver's side door that I had obviously hit with force against something else while drunk, leaving a 2-foot-high gash in the steel. The inside was disgusting. Old bottles, cans, food wrappers, cobwebs, and ants. Who would have thought there could be ants in a car? But they were here, crawling all over everything. There were cigarette burns on the upholstery, and the radio was missing. And God knows where it was. I looked in the trunk, and at first I didn't recognize the mass of rags and rags there, and then I realized it must be my laundry basket, and the dirty laundry of who knows who. and I must have thrown up in the trunk at some point. There were at least a dozen empty whiskey bottles and probably 3 dozen more beer bottles lying around in the mess. I removed enough debris from the driver's seat to climb into the perfume-scented interior and try to start the car. The engine started after a pause accompanied by a howl and then rumbled. My trained hearing picked up that something was wrong. The sound of the engine became more guttural, as if the man had phlegm accumulated in his lungs. I turned it off and sat there, unable to believe that this was my pride and joy. My mom hugged me when I got out of the car but didn't say anything, just walked me back into the house where I followed her into the kitchen. She handed me a roll of paper towels, a bottle of carpet cleaner and Windex, and an empty garbage bag. Don't look at the job in its entirety, Jimmy. Do it piece by piece. Today you clean the front seat. Tomorrow, you clean the back seat and so on. I took them from her and leaned over to kiss her cheek. Thanks, Mom. She wiped her eyes. Go clean up, Jimmy, just like you do with your life. You'll do fine. I walked out, thinking to myself how many times I'd said those words before. I can do this. I can make it work. It's not a problem. And today, I was going to really live up to my words and get down to business. Day 21. I was more active in my meetings, admitting to the group that I was on step 2, attributing to AA and all these people the ability to help me deal with my alcoholism. Some members of the group considered Jesus or God or whatever else was central to their change. More important to me, however, was the group. Religion is helpful for some people, but it was not a good fit for me. A few days later, I received a bill from the hospital for my stay. $24,475. I laughed. A real deep laugh like I hadn't remembered in a long time. I showed it to my dad and he frowned. What the hell, Jimmy? Are you having open heart surgery in there? I shrugged, picked up a rock from the walkway, and held it out to him. What do you want me to do with it? He asked. It's mine, Daddy. Squeeze it for me, and the blood that comes out, we'll send it to them. The second week of May was another milestone for me. About 30 days sober. AA gave me a red chip. Father Michael personally handed it to me at the end of the meeting. I'm very proud of you, Jimmy. It's been a hard road for you, and you have more to go, but you're doing a great job, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I thanked him for his support, and while we were talking, a guy in his 30s slowly approached us. Hey, Jimmy, he called out, extending his hand for a shake. Congrats on 30 days, man. Thanks, I replied, not knowing who he was, but he seemed vaguely familiar. One day at a time, you know. He laughed. Sure. He smirked, looking me straight in the eye. You don't remember me, do you? Sorry, buddy. I wish I did, but I can't connect the name to your face. Tom? Tom Maldevs? From Maldevs Construction? I snapped my fingers. Oh, shit. Sorry, kid. It's been a while. How's it going with you? Still shopping in Florence? Business is good. The season is picking up. And yes, I'm still shopping there. He looked at Michael's father. I see you're traveling to meetings by car. Do you still have that charger? Yes. It's not running right now, but I'm slowly working on it. Hopefully it will be running soon. Why do you ask? Well, I'm looking for laborers for my crew. Nothing fancy, $16 an hour. And I remember you used to work as a longshoreman. He pointed to the disintegrating group coming out of the church. I know what you're going through. I've been sober for 5 years. I don't come often, maybe once a month or so, just to freshen up. And I've seen you there, and it's obvious to me that you're making an effort. So, are you interested? No shit. Yes. I took his hand and shook it firmly up and down. Oh my God, when am I going to start? What can I do? I really need a job. Calm down. It's okay. Monday after Mother's Day, can you make it to the Home Depot on Hempstead Turnpike by 7 in the morning? If I have to grow flippers and swim there, I'll get there. Terrific. If you're there, I'll pick you up and you can consider yourself hired. Take your lunch and a jug of water with you. He paused. Oh, and count on the job. I grinned and shook his hand one last time. No problem, Tom. I won't let you down. He tapped a red chip on my hand and walked away with a smile. On the home front, the bills from the hospital continued to mount, topping $29,000 by this point, and the radiologists, psychologists, doctors, and other specialists were adding their pennies to the amount of unpaid bills. I received a new notice from the court about the child support arrears, which had already exceeded $2,000 and continued to grow, not counting interest, fines, and more. And child services still wouldn't let me see my sons. The social worker told Far Mike that this is an internal discussion that they are taking seriously at this point. Nonsense, of course. On Mother's Day, my dad and I took my mom out for brunch, where we ate in quiet company, happy to be with each other. At the end of the meal, I asked if they were going to visit Myra. Mom looked at Dad and replied, "Yes, Jimmy. We were going to stop by to see her later today." I pulled a large envelope out of my pocket and handed it to her. "Can you give this to her for me?" And she looked at it and saw my wife's name written on the front with a magic marker. "What is it?" I sighed. "It's some sort of apology. I can't write, and God knows my grades in school prove it." "Well, isn't that the goddamn truth?" Dad volunteered, and the crooked smile on his lips took away all the poignancy of his remark. Mom playfully clapped him on the shoulder and gestured for me to continue. "Anyway, this is what I had to do for AA. It's a list of every single thing I've done that I can remember. Every time I lied to her, every time I hid my drinking, and every time I let her down. I just wanted to let her know that a lot of our problems were my fault. Mine. And that I'm taking responsibility and trying to fix myself." "Oh, Jimmy." Fresh tears stood in Mom's eyes. "I know this won't fix anything, but I want her to know that I'm here. I love her. And even though I haven't seen her and Jay in so long, she's still their mom, and I'm so grateful for what we've done for them." She put the envelope in her bag. "I'll make sure she gets it, son." Monday morning, I woke up at 5:30, made 2 sandwiches, loaded the small cooler bag with lunch and a big bottle of water, and pulled my old bike out of the barn. I put air in the tires, dripped some oil on the chain, and got on, riding toward Hempstead Turnpike. 45 pain-filled, agonizing minutes later, I stopped in front of the Home Depot store and got off the bike on shaky legs. Oh gods, my knees, my hips, my ankles hurt. Staggering, I walked inside and asked the clerk if I could leave my bike against the wall for a few minutes. After getting permission, I walked to the nearest cash register and bought 2 small packs of Advil and a cheap bottle of water. I popped 4 aspirin tablets and waited outside for my heart to settle and my muscles to relax. Tom Meldis pulled up a little before 7 in his big white and black truck, 3 other guys already sitting inside and riding in the back. "Hey, Jimmy. Good to see you." "Thanks, Tom." I shook his hand gratefully. "Thanks for the chance." "No problem. This is Hector, my number 2. And this is Juan and Saul." I silently shook hands with the rest of the guys. "Is that your bike?" "Damn, Jimmy. Did you ride your bike here?" "I said I'd be here." He laughed. "Okay, you came by car. Throw it in the trunk. I thought you already fixed your car." I shrugged, climbed up on the back door, and got the bike into the trunk along with the other construction supplies. "As soon as I get my paycheck, I can buy plugs, filters, fluids, and belts." He nodded his head silently, and we drove to the indicated location. It was an attic, partially second floor, and it was obvious they had been working here for days. My job consisted of a lot of running around, hauling lumber, getting tools, and lots of cleaning. And on that first day, I learned a lot of things. Like how much I don't know about construction. Like how out of shape I was. How hard the other guys on the crew worked, and how I had to bust my ass to keep up with them. At 4:30, Tom announced that the job was over, and we all climbed into the truck to take us back to Hempstead. I was dreading the bike ride home, thinking I would call my mom and hope she would pick me up. Tom dropped off 3 other guys, giving 2 of them cash from his pocket for their labors today. He asked for my address, and I told him he didn't have to take me home. Nonsense. "You did it today, Jimmy. The least I can do is drive you home." I gave him the address, and we drove the rest of the way in delirium. When we stopped at my parents' house, he helped me get my bike down and reached into his pocket. He pulled out 4 $50 bills and held them out to me. "Listen to me, Jimmy. This is an advance, not a gift, but an advance on your paycheck. Use them to start your car and fill it up with gas until Wednesday. I don't want you half dead because you rode your bike to work." "Tom, really, thanks. I won't let you down." "Didn't think you would." He started the truck. "I'll see you tomorrow, Jimmy." So that night I worked on my baby until it was time for the meeting, and then came home and worked on it some more until it was too dark to do anything. Tuesday was a repeat of Monday. My dad was outside with me, helping me put the last of the spark plugs in. "Okay, Jimmy," he said, wiping his hands clean of grease. Start this piece of shit up and try to move it out of my driveway. I smiled, put the key in the ignition, and turned it. The Charger started and sounded much smoother than last time. I increased the revs and heard the engine roar briefly before it started. Loud, growling, alarming. It sounded just the way I wanted it to. All right, Pops. Sounds good. He shrugged, closing the hood. What a load of crap. Back in my day, everyone knew how to fix a car. Now there's so much computer crap under the hood, you can't do anything without a manual. He patted me on the shoulder. But yeah, Jimmy, it sounds great. Feels good, doesn't it? Putting the pieces of your life together? Yes, Dad. Yes. He gave me a gentle nudge, pushing me away from the driver's door. When I stepped back, he slid in front of me and got behind the wheel. Hey! I smiled. How's it going? Huh. You've been messing around with this shit long enough. Get in the passenger seat and let me take you for a ride. Dad. I walked around the car and opened the other door. The smell of the cleaned interior was much more pleasant to my nose. You can't drive it. I still have to renew my insurance. He pointed to the seatbelt, and I complied. Close the door, kid. Mom and I took care of it and paid for the next 6 months. As I buckled up, he chuckled. You're getting better, Jimmy. Don't make an ass out of us, okay? No way, Pops. I took his hand and shook it with genuine feeling. You can count on me. Good. He put my car in reverse and pulled out of the driveway. Now let's see what this chicken shit car can do. When we got home an hour later, Mom was standing in the kitchen looking at the clock. It's already 10:36. You two jokers have any idea how long you've been gone? Tell me next time you go for a walk. Where the hell have you been? Dad stretched deeply, then walked over to Mom and kissed her on the lips. Honey, I'm tired and I'm going to bed. He put his arm around her waist and pulled her behind him, adding, Oh, and we're going to talk about changing my car to something more manly. Good night, Jimmy. He tossed over his shoulder and waved his hand in the air, leading my mom into the bedroom. My life continued on in the same vein, getting better and better every day. There were small victories and small defeats along the way, but I was in control. I dictated what I wanted out of life, and it wasn't booze. On Monday, Memorial Day, a CPS worker showed up at my parents' house. Mom and Dad were putting together a little barbecue for the three of us, I thought. Then Dad Mike showed up, said a friendly hello to everyone, and headed over to the CPS worker to check her watch. What happened? Just as I was about to ask why they had come and if it was a surprise visit, I heard a thin voice from the side gate. Daddy? I turned and saw a little boy, tall for his age, about 6 years old, with red curly hair and wearing a blue and gray striped shirt. He was standing next to another boy, blond and slightly younger, holding a tattered Florence Building Supply hat in his hand. They both waited, looking at me with hope, fear, and uncertainty. My boys. My sons. I dropped the plate of hot dogs on the lawn and fell to my knees as if someone had hit me in the back with a double team. I gasped in searing pain, clutching one hand to my chest, trying to stop the blurring of my vision and the roaring in my ears. I managed to wheeze out, John! Joel! Oh my God! Just then, two figures crashed into me, wrapping their arms around me with boyish screams and squeals of joy. I cried as I hugged my sons, tears streaming down their hair and onto my chin. Their scent inhaled my nose, and I noticed nothing but the watery vision of two boys clinging to me like drowning people. I couldn't breathe. The smell of metal was in my throat, and I sobbed over and over, hugging my two sons with feverish desire, pressing them to my chest as if I could merge my body with theirs. And the only thing the audience could make out in the gibberish my sons and I spoke to each other was the repeated and incessant exclamation, I love you. I missed you so much. I love you. The end. If you haven't watched the first part of this video, the link will be in the description. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel.